What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I'll be setting up my fantasy cruncher for the Thursday night football game between the Jaguars and the Jets. I'll be setting up for the largest field GPP on DraftKings. Some of the steps I'll take here, things like using really unique players, leaving salary on the table, I might not do if I were playing a small field GPP, certainly wouldn't do if I were playing cash games. This video is just for setting up for the largest field GPP. All right, first thing I'm going to do, rearrange my columns. I don't see what I want to see in the middle of the screen. Luckily, I have a quick view saved. And all I want to see in the middle of the screen is ownership projections, my projection, which these are the default is the Stokastic projection for me, and then my exposure cap and how much I get of players once I have run a crunch. That's all I want to see in the middle of my screen. Those are the only stats that I use when I'm building. Now I'm going to sort by projection. Now, I suppose one column I could add here, instead of going back and forth, if you have access to the single game tool, you could export this data and then import that directly into Fantasy Cruncher. I've never done that. I don't know why. Probably save me some time. I just go back and forth between the two as I'm building. But you could add those columns through the Upload Data tab if you wanted to. Anyway, I'm not going to do that right now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove players from my player pool who have projections of 0. And I'm just clicked on the top one. I'm scrolling down, making sure I get all these players out. Okay. And I just do that because it's going to save me some time later when I'm making groups. All right. Next, I'm going to go to the captain tab, and I'm going to set an exposure cap of 20%. So I can't get more than 20% of any player. Again, there's nothing magic about that number. That's just generally my starting place. On some slates, I will change that number, or I'll change the number for individual players. All right, next I'm going to go into advanced options. And these, I'm going to be working in two tabs here, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting here in the general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm going to leave at 1 unique player per lineup. So my lineup's going to be 1 player apart from each other. If I were making 40 or fewer lineups, I would probably change this to 2 unique players for the sake of diversifying my lineup set. Salary cap, I'm not going to set a minimum. I will set a maximum. I do this just for the purpose of avoiding most duplicated lineups. If I'm lucky enough to win, I want to win a lot of money. I'm less likely to do that if I'm using the full salary cap, because most people want to use the full salary cap. So if you do use the full salary cap, you're more likely to run into duplicated lineups, and sometimes very frequently duplicated lineups. So I try to avoid those. You can use the full salary cap and still get unique. There are ways to do it, but it's a lot easier if you just leave a little salary on the table. So I'm leaving 1,000 for the sake of this video. This is not, the exact number that I use, but just keep in mind, the more salary you leave on the table, probably you're giving up some projection if you're not allowing yourself to use the full salary cap, but you're more likely to be unique. Offensive players versus defense, the default is set to a max of 2 players. I'm going to change that to 5 players, so I could theoretically have 5 players from one team against just the defense of the opposing team. An example here would be if you think the Jets offense is just going to be terrible, and the Jets defense, of course, is very good, but maybe Jacksonville scores a couple touchdowns. You could have 5 players from Jacksonville, or four offensive players from Jacksonville plus the Jacksonville defense going up against just the Jets defense. Could be viable. I want to allow for that in my set. Of course, I'm not going to run into it very often anyway, but it's just something that I allow as I'm building. Exposure cap, globally, I'm keeping that at 100%. I did change already in the captain spot to 20%, but elsewhere in the flex, I'm allowing for up to 100% of some players. Randomness, I'm going to change this to 30%. I've already got it turned on. Change that to 30%. The more control you want over your lineups, the lower you should set this number. Some people I know use 0 randomness. You could do that. If you want complete control over your lineups, just leave this at 0. I like to leave a little bit up to chance, maybe get a little bit different. So I put 30% randomness on my lineups. Minimum projection included in calculation. The default is set to 3. I'm going to leave it at 3. And if there's a player who I want in my player pool who projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points, I'm just going to manually boost their projection to be above 3 fantasy points. And then players from each team max, the default is set to 5. I'm going to leave that at 5 so I can have 5 players from one team against just one of the opposing team. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, zero risk because it's all free. And now is the perfect time to sign up because you'll get access to the tools for Thursday night football, Saturday football, and Sunday football if you sign up today. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. All right, next I'm going to go into groups. And I'm going to create groups revolving around the quarterbacks, starting with a Zach Wilson captain group. So I'm going to Zach Wilson in the captain spot. I'm going to make him my key player. And then I'm going to sort by position. And I'm going to add all of the Jets pass catchers to a secondary group. I don't think you really need to include the running backs for the Jets necessarily. They're not very involved. When Zach Wilson is at quarterback in particular, he just does not throw to the running backs very often. Maybe I'll include Michael Carter. I think Bam Knight just has not been very involved in the passing game. Michael Carter has had some games, even with Zach Wilson. I think he had a game where he got like 7 targets from Zach Wilson. So I'm going to include Michael Carter, but not Bam Knight. I think you could go either way. You could include both of them. You could include neither of them, but I think I'm going to include just Michael Carter. All right, so that'll do it for this group. Now I'm going to with Zach Wilson. Not a ton of rushing upside. He's not like an elite runner, but he does rush for more than 10 yards per game on average. I think he has 5 touchdowns already through like rushing touchdowns through like 21 career starts, something along those lines. So he has shown some rushing upside. So I think with Zach Wilson, actually both the quarterbacks, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to treat them the same way for these groups, which is I'm going to just require one pass catcher when I've got Zach Wilson in the captain spot, and then I'm going to give boost to the pass catchers to make it more likely that I get multiple. I'm giving 12% boost here. Again, nothing magical about that number. Just a number that seems to work for me through trial and error. Bit of a lower boost for running backs typically. All right, then I'm going to make Trevor Lawrence a captain group. So I'm finding Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot and then adding all of making him my key player, then adding all of the Jags pass catchers to a secondary group. If you haven't watched these videos before, the reason that I'm doing these groups is because of the way the scoring works on DraftKings. On every passing play, the quarterback is being outscored by the receiver or whoever's throwing the ball. Typically, the quarterback is being outscored by whoever is receiving the ball. I'm including Travis Etienne for the Jags group. All right, that'll do. So because of the scoring dynamics where every time Trevor Lawrence throws the ball, the receiver outscores and they get a point per reception, they get more points per yard, more points per touchdown. Because of that dynamic and because the quarterback is typically the most expensive or one of the most expensive players on the team, it's pretty unlikely for a quarterback to be the optimal captain without having multiple players, multiple pass catchers in the flex, unless something strange. So either he's a rushing quarterback. If the quarterback spikes rushing upside, they can be the optimal captain without multiple pass catchers in the flex, which Trevor Lawrence has some upside in the running game. So he is a quarterback that I think you could pair with just one receiver in the flex because he has that rushing upside. There are other scenarios where, sometimes a quarterback will throw to a pass catcher who's not in the player pool. There are ways for it to work out, but typically for quarterbacks who are not elite rushers, my preference is to have multiple pass catchers in the flex. But I do for guys like Trevor Lawrence, who has some rushing upside, I'm going to allow, as I build for a 150 set, I'm going to allow to have some lineups with just one pass catcher, but I prefer to have multiple. So I'm going to give boost to these pass catchers. Again, the reason being, if they don't, have a ton of rushing upside, they have to do all their work through the air. And obviously, if they're put up enough points to be the optimal captain, that means that they are throwing a lot, probably a lot of yards, a few touchdowns. So if they're throwing it to just one player, that player, because of the scoring dynamics, is likely to outscore them, and that receiver is going to be the optimal captain instead of the quarterback. So they kind of have to be spreading the ball around to be the optimal captain, unless they do spike a rushing upside. Okay. So that's going to do it for this group. So I'm only requiring one pass catcher, but I'm making it more likely that I get to multiple with the boosts. Did the same for both of the quarterbacks. And now I'm going to make another group for each of them in the flex. So Zach Wilson in the flex, making him my key player. And then adding all of the Jets pass catchers to a secondary group. Again, I'm going to include Michael Carter, not the other running backs. And then now, because I have Zach Wilson in the flex, I can include the pass catchers in the captain spot as well. Okay, that'll do it. And for these groups, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just adding them to the second group. This group just says, if you have Zach Wilson in the flex, require at least one pass catcher elsewhere in the lineup. That's all this group is saying. Not giving any boosts or anything. And then we do the same thing for Trevor Lawrence. Almost tempted to not make the group for Lawrence, just because the Jets defense is pretty good. And Trevor does have some rushing upside. I could see him using his legs a little bit more if he needs to in this matchup. It's kind of a must-win game. So I think it might be okay to have some lineups with Trevor Lawrence in the flex without any pass catchers from the Jaguars. But I think I am going to require them. Okay, good. That's all I'm doing for this group. I'm just saying, if you got Trevor Lawrence in the flex, require at least one pass catcher somewhere else in the lineup. I think I'm going to leave the groups at that. And then I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups using my projections and see what comes out. All right, so looking at the very first lineup, we've got Zach Wilson in the captain spot with multiple pass catchers, which is, what I was going for. I gave boosts to those pass catchers, so it makes sense that I would get to multiple when I've got Zach Wilson in the captain spot. And I like this lineup. It's got, two primary pass catchers plus a running back, and the Jets defense, just Travis Etienne on the comeback. This lineup would definitely work on a Jets onslaught. Second lineup, I still have Zach Wilson with multiple pass catchers and Bam Knight now instead of Michael Carter. We've got the kicker and Travis Etienne for the Jags. Third lineup. Okay, so now we've got Zach Wilson in the flex with Garrett Wilson in the captain spot. This lineup would make a lot of sense if Garrett Wilson has a very big game. He's likely bringing Zach Wilson along with him. Not necessarily. I sometimes like to have lineups where you've got a wide receiver in the captain spot without their quarterback in there, but there is obviously positive correlation there. So I think this lineup makes sense. Here we've got Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot with just one pass catcher in the flex in Christian Kirk. Again, I allow for that intentionally. I don't mind having just one pass catcher. I don't want to, it's not my preference. Like I think I would prefer to have majority of my Trevor Lawrence captain lineups with multiple pass catchers. So I'm going to look at those lineups specifically now. All right, so first one, just one. Second one, just one. Third one, yeah. None of these are getting more. Okay, here's the first one with multiple, and that includes a running back. So I think I might need to give bigger boosts to those pass catchers. But first, before I go and adjust my groups, the second thing I do, so I look at the lineups, look how well they correlate. These ones, they mostly correlate okay on an individual level, but I am getting to too many lineups for my liking that have just Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot with just one pass catcher. So, but before I go and adjust my groups at all, I'm just going to see if I'm getting to the exposures that I want for different players. It looks like the Jaguars just don't project all that well. I think I'd like more than 27% Trevor Lawrence. Now, he is pretty damn expensive. He's a lot more expensive than Zach Wilson, and their projection is about the same. So it makes sense that I'm only getting to 27%, but I think I'd like it to be a little bit more even. I'm going to give Trevor a little bit of a boost. Salary here. So he's more expensive. Now I have him at least projecting a little bit better. Makes it more likely I'll get to a little bit more. But I also want to see why I'm not getting too many Jags in those lineups. So I'm getting to a ton of Travis Etienne. That might be okay. A lot of Bam Knight might be okay. And then not a ton of Michael Carter, who's going a little bit lower owned. Maybe I want a little bit more Michael Carter. And here's where. So I'm not going to go through my actual process exactly. I'm showing you exactly what my process looks like. I'm not going to. I haven't really done the research to decide exactly how much I want of different players, and that's a decision that I make after inactives come out an hour and a half before the game. I decide how much I want, or approximately how much I want of various players, and try to shoot for within that range. I'm not. So this is not a decision that I'm actually making right now, but I'm showing you what I might think. So I see 11% Michael Carter. He's only 20% owned. Maybe I want to get above 20%. So I just go in and give him a little bit of a boost. I look at JaMychal Hasty. Do I want more of JaMychal Hasty? He is the direct backup for Travis Etienne, only project for 5.6% ownership. Relatively cheap. Maybe I'll give him a little bit of a boost, try and get him into some lineups. And then these other three, I don't know, maybe I'll just leave them out of my player pool. All of them project for fewer than 3 fantasy points, so currently not in my player pool. I think I'm probably okay with that. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, zero risk because it's all free. And now is the perfect time to sign up because you'll get access to the tools for Thursday night football, Saturday football, and Sunday football if you sign up today. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. All right, moving on to wide receivers. Not getting into much Christian Kirk at all. So this explains why all of those lineups where I've got Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot don't have any Jaguars pass catchers or don't have many Jaguars pass catchers because none of these guys project very well, which makes sense. It's a very tough defense for the Jets. It's unlikely that these Jaguars pass catchers are all going to have big games or possibly that any of them have a big game. But I do think I'd want more than 8% of Christian Kirk on a single game slate. So maybe I'll give him a little bit of a boost. Maybe Zay Jones also. Maybe Marvin Jones. Just saw both of the Joneses have a big game the last time out. Obviously, this is a tougher matchup, but I think it's possible they could have big games. Maybe I'll get Braxton Berrios into the player pool. All right, tight ends. Evan Ingram also doesn't project all that well. Maybe you want to give him a little bit of a boost. Conklin currently getting to 29%. Most likely, if I don't change his projection, I'm going to get less than 29% of Tyler Conklin just because of all of the other changes I've made to other players' projections. And keep in mind, always, every projection is just relative to every other projection here. When I change one projection, if I give a positive boost to Evan Ingram, that essentially gives a negative boost to every other player on the slate, sort of. It's just because all projections are relative. CJ Uzoma, you can see here, well, he's not even in the player pool, but you can also see that his price tag is just slightly south of Tyler Conklin's. So if I give him a boost up to 5 fantasy points, I can feel confident I'm probably going to get less of CJ Uzoma than Tyler Conklin because he's only slightly cheaper and I'm projecting him much worse. Chris Mannertz, I don't know if I want him. Maybe I'll give him a little bit of a boost, get him into the player pool. I might get a ton of him just given the projection of 3 just because of the 200 price tag. I don't think we have any other 200 players in there, but we'll see. These kickers, maybe these are fine amounts. If I don't adjust their projections at all, I'm probably going to get less of them because I adjusted elsewhere, which I'd be fine with if I get a little bit less. And then defenses, same thing. All right, now I'm going to crunch it out. Yeah, it looks like I got a little bit less of the Jaguars. I don't know how much I was getting exactly of the Jets before, but maybe a little bit less there. Still getting a good amount of both the kickers and the defenses. Tight ends, now you can see I got CJ Uzoma in the player pool. As expected, though, still getting only 1.3% to Tyler Conklin's 28%. Got a little bit more Evan Ingram now. See, I did get a lot more of Chris Mannertz. Probably don't want 13% Chris Mannertz, but maybe I'll adjust elsewhere and see if I get less. All right, now I'm up to 16% Christian Kirk. That's looking good. Just give these a little bit bigger boosts before I do one more crunch. You can see here, I've got Marvin Jones more expensive than Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore projects better than Marvin Jones. So I'm probably going to get more of Elijah Moore than Marvin Jones, which I'm totally fine with. And that's also not necessarily the case on a showdown slate, just because you do need at least one player from each team. So maybe in some lineups, it'll force in, Marvin Jones instead of Elijah Moore, just because you need one Jaguars player. All right, still getting to 71% ETN, 52% BAM. Now I'm up to 25% Michael Carter. Maybe I want a little bit more to Michael Hasty in there. Getting a little bit more Trevor now. Now you can see here, ETN now. So I was 70% there plus 17% here. That's probably more ETN than I want. So maybe I'll just give him a slight negative boost. And then we'll crunch it out again. All right. Got a little bit less ETN now. Still not a ton of JaMychal Hasty. That's fine. Now I'm getting to a little bit more of these Jaguars receivers. So now that I see that, I'm going to go back to my lineups, see if they correlate a little better. So first one we see Trevor Lawrence in the captain spot. Now I've got 4 pass catching options, including ETN. That might be a bit much. I think I'd be okay with 4 there. But this is 4 pass catching options against the Jets defense. It's interesting. It could work out. If he throws pick 6 plus touchdowns to each of these guys, certainly it's could work out. It's obviously a little bit thin in this matchup. It's going to be tough, but I'm going to allow for that lineup. Second lineup, Zach Wilson, you can see with 3 pass catching options, that looks good. Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne on the comeback. That lineup looks fine to me. I like this lineup better than this lineup, just because this one, it's I could see it happening. The Jags have a big game. The Jets have a pick 6 and a couple sacks or something, and the Jets offense with Zach Wilson doesn't do much. I think it's a fine lineup, but it is asking a lot to get all of these guys in the optimal. All right, next lineup, we've got Elijah Moore, captain, with Zach Wilson, Bam Knight. Got Trevor Lawrence with ETN, and the kicker looks good. In general, I'd say I'm liking these lineups better. I should look at my Trevor Lawrence captain specifically, because those are the ones I wasn't liking before. Yeah, right away we see these both have multiple. Okay. Now here's one with just Zay Jones in the flex. Again, I'm okay with it in some lineups. I just don't want it to be the majority of my Trevor Lawrence captain lineups. Here's another one with multiple. So in general, I am getting to multiple pass catchers from the Jaguars when I have Trevor Lawrence at captain. And then this is the same thing for Zach Wilson. I'll double check that. Now that I've given these boosts to the Jaguars, I'm getting more of them. Yeah, I'm still getting same thing with Zach Wilson. Multiple pass catchers in these lineups with Zach Wilson and captain. So happier with these correlations than the initial correlations. Again, this is not going to be, this is not my final lineup set here. I'm just kind of showing you the process, what it generally looks like. So I look at my lineup cards, make sure that they correlate well enough, and then I look at the individual player exposures. Starting, let's see, defense. Yeah, I'm getting to 14%, 18%. That seems about right. Kickers, 30%, 17%. Probably fine with those numbers. Evan Ingram, now I'm down to just 11%. If I want more, I'll give him a boost. I'm not going to go through the whole process now, but this is just general. It looks like I look through position by position. Do I want more? Do I want less? How do they project relative to the players who are close to them in terms of salary? Who do I want more of? Who do I want less of? And this is just the process for figuring out what I want my exposures to look like, what I want my lineups to look like. And of course, you can always go back to the single game tool, which you can find NFL premium data, Showdown single game, top Showdown single game plays. That's the tool that I'm using typically to make these decisions, and use this tool, figure out how much you want of various players, maybe throw in some of your own intuition, and that's could be a recipe for success. At least you're going to have, if you follow this process, some correlated lineups, and hopefully you can find some gems in your player pool to get a little bit different. Anyway, that is my process. Good luck tomorrow. Hope you can find some success using this or a similar process.